Hello, and welcome to what is for random books 13. I've got to move the camera, haven't I? It was okay a second ago, but now it's not. Ah, that's better. That's better. For random books 13. And as it's 13, I feel like going something strange or random or really random. So, well, actually, to be honest, this book fell on me. So I got out my other Armoured books. I like this book. It's Lloyd Clark's No Relation and a different spelling of Clark. Kursk, The Greatest Battle of Eastern Front, 1943. I like this book not just because it's published in 2011, so it's fairly recent and has fairly up-to-date information about what is a very, very interesting battle. I like this book because it realizes that whilst Kursk is considered one of the most famous tank battles of all time, it is in many ways an artillery battle far more than a tank battle. That's the truth of every land war. It's the dirty little secret. We talk about naval warfare as duels between missiles and aircraft and all these things, and the only reason that aircraft really take out battleships and aircraft carriers stay in service as much as they have done is because of the range they offer. And this is the thing when people start telling me that the age of the aircraft carrier is over, because say what you like, they've still got the range on pretty much everything. You got a hypersonic missile. That's great. I got a hypersonic air launch missile flying from my aircraft carrier. You now need to not only find the airbase can move closer to you, so the missiles can be launched even quicker at you. It's fun. So, the good thing about this book is it has a lot of great history in it, but it also has a lot of great quotes. Posters on the wall were eagerly read, and there were certainly plenty of posters. A Russian tank crashing a giant crab with a Hitler moustache. A red soldier ramming his bayonet down the throat of a giant Hitler-faced cat. Razavati fascistico correndo, it said, crush the fascist vermin. Appeals to women. Women, go and work on the collective farms. Replace the men now in the army. Pravada or Isvetsia, with the full text of Stalin's speech was stuck up, and everywhere, crowds of people were rereading it. The Guards Rifle Division, the 67th, dug in here, believed that they were safe in their strong fortifications, echeloned in depth. They were aware that swampy hollows and valleys, wide mine belts, wire entanglements, flamethrower barriers, and tank ditches were in front of them. They also could see that they were deployed in a labyrinth of trenches and bunkers, anti-tank positions, rifle pits, and mortar emplacements. Behind them, a network of small strong points and defensive works was spread over the countryside. The job needed a steady hand and calm nerves. Each anti-tank mine, when the earth had been cleared away around it, had to be lifted carefully, just a little way, because many of them were additionally secured against lifting by being anchored to a peg by a short length of wire. Yard by yard, the parties crept forward, probing and clearing the mines with their hands, lifting them carefully, removing the detonators, and putting the death traps aside. Down amongst the engineers crashed Soviet mortar shells. Over their heads screamed the deafening 8.8 centimeter shells of their own Tigers. This is a very, very, very good book. And it's one of those battles which doesn't get discussed enough. And when it does get discussed, It's discussed either from one side or the other, and everything is horribly skewed in a way that doesn't make it at all balanced. This doesn't skew it. That makes it worth a read. Troop Leader. A Tank Commander story by Bill Bellamy. Forward is by Richard Holmes, and frankly, that is always a stamp of quality. That is always a permanent stamp of quality. As soon as we'd been organised, I went and inspected Abbot of Chantry. We received a lot of hits during our brief encounter, and everyone told me that I would be astonished at the results. I certainly was. The shells had penetrated the armour plate to the extent of about 2 inches, and had stuck in it, looking as if they had been spot welded on. I asked for Bill Best to come up from the LAD and have a look at when he had time, and sure enough, a short while later, up he came on his old motorbike. He was as nonplussed as we all were. I went back to check it out. The upshot of the matter was that, having checked the serial number, he found that I had been issued with an unarmoured training tank. Our beloved Abbess was made from soft steel and was lighter than the others, which explained why she was so much faster, but wouldn't have stopped much except 20mm shells. I was offered a replacement tank, but we wanted to keep her, and despite a great deal of pressure from outside, we managed to persuade them that, for us, she was a must. The position which we were occupying was absolutely fascinating, as we could see a great deal of enemy movement, comprising infantry and soft vehicles. Occasionally, we were able to direct the gunners as they carried out a shoot into the village itself, but for the most part, it was the usual watching role. By plotting the comings and goings of the Joan vehicles, we located the enemy headquarters, which was the cafe. Chased them out of that with some accurate shelling. During the afternoon, it became apparent that they knew where we were, as they started shelling us in return. But none of it was close enough to cause us much worry. That evening, a platoon of the Queens plus a gunner OP took over from us, and we went back into harbour. The regiment stayed in the area, carrying out various roles of this nature. I'm still there on the 19th of September, when the endless lines of gliders flew over on their way to Arnhem and the airborne landings. I can remember it well, because at the time the troop was in a second-line defence position, and we had a grandstand view. It was a grey day, and they looked so small and so vulnerable as they made their way slowly across the sky. The towing aircraft seemed to be fairly steady, but many of the gliders were yawning up and down behind them. I was glad that we were fighting in established positions and on the ground. We didn't really know what was going on until somewhat later in that day, when we picked up news on the radio from BBC London. During the next 2 days, we gathered that, despite the initial success, all was not well at Arnhem, or along the corridor leading to it. The Guards Armoured Division and others had fought with tremendous gallantry to achieve the impossible, but were now so thinly stretched that reinforcements were vital. The road was being cut and convoys of critical supplies could not get through. Units of the American 101st Airborne Division were holding bridges on the route up, but were not in direct contact with each other. In fact, the situation was difficult, with the enemy on both sides of the corridor. If the story of the British submarines is forgotten, and the story of the British sloops is amalgamated into that of the corvettes and the Battle of Atlantic so much as to be almost invisible, the story of the British armoured forces in World War II is misunderstood. I would give you an example of that scene from Band of Brothers, where honestly, in the Netherlands, the British armoured are almost portrayed as being twits in a village, because you have him going, "My orders are, I cannot fire because I don't know where he is." Rules of engagement. They're fun. Next one. Tank Men by Robert Kershaw. The human story of tanks at war. This looks at the development of tanks. Genesis, the new tank men preparing for war, a different war, Blitzkrieg in France, tank action France, Western Desert seesaw, desert tank battle, the Russian Crucible, desert comeback, tank action Eastern Front, mass versus technology, Normandy tank fighting, and tank men. This book is an attempt to bring all of it into there, and it has this great big thing at the beginning. Dramatis Personae. Allies, British and Commonwealth. Eric Alsop, Lieutenant, 8th Royal Tank Regiment, born 1918, fought through the desert into Italy and discerned a growing professionalism that was impatient within previous cavalry donkey walloper philosophies. You had to be good in order to survive. Peter Balfour, Lieutenant 3rd Battalion, Royal Scots, chartered increasingly professionalism among tank men in Normandy to survive and get the war quickly finished, disliked the SAS and was seriously wounded shortly before the end of the war. James Carson, Lieutenant Welsh Guards. He had a fond regard for his crew, who taught him everything, and discovered the tank turret was a social leveller. He disliked Germans, particularly the SS, who executed one of his crews, and fought from Normandy through northwest Europe to Germany. Jack Clegg, Corporal, 1st Forfar Yeomanry. Jack Clegg need not have gone to war because he had a safe appointment as a gunnery instructor in the UK. Decided to serve overseas and revived in time for the Northwest Europe campaign. He was killed 3 months before the end of the war. Bill Close, Peter and Private 2's Squadron Commander, 3rd Royal Tank Regiment. Born 1914, joined in 1933 and fought at Calais, Greece, and the desert and North Africa, Normandy, and Northwest Europe. He was commissioned and ended the war as a squadron commander. His remarkable experience encompasses the span of this book. Robert Crisp, Captain, 3rd Royal Tank Regiment, a newly promoted captain. He had played Test cricket for South Africa. He served in Greece, where he developed sceptical and frank views about the technical performance of British tanks. Strategists wanted to make a tank which was as much a horse as possible, he declared. It goes on. This book is a wry thing. I don't agree with all it says, but if you want an overview of tank warfare in World War II, there aren't many books better than this. In fact, most ones that are better are a hell of a lot bigger and a lot more expensive. For someone who's wanting to get into, just begin their studies in this and get a good overview, this is perfect starting point. And for those interested in more British flair, British Armoured Divisions and their commanders, 1939 to 1945, by Richard Doherty. The first book I was ever sent to review, which wasn't naval history, because no one else wanted to review it. Because apparently it's contentious. It has maps in it. And what seems to be contentious reading through this is, and by the way, it does a brilliant job of charting the divisions, in my opinion. Yes, there are areas where I would love to see more information, but for what the book's for, it's excellent. It's what seems to be contentious is it basically argues, rather like I argue with the Royal Navy and naval aviation, that the British Army, far from being incoherent or wrong when it comes to development of armored warfare, had actually developed some fairly good doctrines, which, to an extent, didn't always come of age during World War II. And 17-pounder armed Challenger tank. In fact, some of them are only just coming of service today, which is rather sad. It is rather sad, because it means they get a rep they don't deserve. Weather played a critical part. Most of the aircraft intended to support the attackers were grounded across the Channel in England, leaving only the Normandy-based No. 83 group. Heavy overnight rain made the going difficult, and a mist shrouded the ground when 44 Lowland and 46 Highland brigades, with armour of 31 Tank Brigade, left their start line at 7:30 a.m. to cross the soft ground separating them from their objectives. The Scots had a difficult time, but by noon the way was open for 11th Armoured Division to advance towards Tourmerville, Gavroche and the Odon bridges. Moving off at 12:50 p.m., hardly had 29th Armoured Brigade cleared the ruined village of Chus, then it met opposition so stiff that the race to Odon was stalled. Instead, the brigade became involved in several hours of hard fighting for no gain. Once more, the infantry of 15th Scottish were called into action, this time the men of 227 Highland Brigade, who met equally tough opposition, including accurate artillery fire, and so bad was the rain that there was now no aircraft to support the ground troops. Nature had come to the aid of Germans. By the end of the day, German troops still held 8th Corps objective and had claimed the destruction of 50 British tanks. 11th Armoured Division's introduction to action was proving every bit as unpleasant as that of 7th Armoured. Divisional history noted that, to clear the woods and villages just north of the Odon, it was found necessary to commit the remaining Scottish brigade the same evening, but very little progress was made with the attack, and it was discontinued. They resumed on the morrow with the support of 29th Armoured Brigade. For the situation which it had been hoped would warrant the separate employment of the two divisions in alternate stages of battles, now clearly demanded their close cooperation if either was to get through. Sometimes you do need mass. This is a very good book. Very, very good book. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed episode 13 of 4 Random Books. And it's very close to the 17-minute mark when it's supposed to be 15 minutes. So, bye-bye and see you again soon.